Hi, I'm Joe Tolan, President and CEO here at Metro United Way in Louisville, Kentucky.
Thanks. Joe, what were you hoping to accomplish with the Spot On workshop?
Couple things. One is I think that we're not atypical among United Ways of some size around the country in that we're beginning to develop some muscle around data analytics, but there are so many different ways that you can use the data, so many different ways you can mine it, and competing priorities for that. So the way Spot On is done, we had like almost 30 of our staff participating. So you create a shared experience, you create a shared understanding of what the data is telling us, and if you're lucky, you create a shared commitment to a short list of priorities, and that's exactly what happened with Spot On for us.
How was Spot On different from other strategic workshops, Can Do, et cetera, that you've conducted before?
I've been through a few similar kinds of experiences at Spot On, but there's one big difference between Spot On and what I was familiar with what was called Can Do's, which were in their own right good. But in Can Do, we went for like a week, like 5 work days, and spent a lot of time compiling the data, manually compiling the data. And in this day and age, there's really no need to do that. And in reality, we can order reports out of the database. And so the big difference here was that the time we had together, which was over the course of a couple days, really allowed us to come out of the gate focused on, okay, here's what the data is telling us. What does that suggest we need to be doing? Where do we focus? Do we focus on Gen X's? Do we focus on boomers? Do we focus on retirees? Do we focus on a certain psychographic segment of any of the above? And those are real choices that have to be made in this day and age at United Ways because none of us had the capability to focus on all of it. And if you go deep enough into the data, you get some pretty good clues, if not absolute flat, hard data that says, hey, where your instincts take you isn't where the benefits are to be had. So you're going to be data-driven or you're going to go by habit. And it helps you make data-driven decisions.
Telling you what. That's why you make the big bucks. Why they're naming a building after you. So Joe, 6 months on, 6 months later, what results have you seen so far, financially, culturally, in any other way from your Spot On experience?
It's really interesting. We're 6 months or so past the conclusion of our Spot On experience where we were all together. I can't say that we have huge financial returns at this point. Didn't expect that, okay? But what we do have is a tenacious focus on what elements of our database of donors that we know should we be focusing on, and because we also have psychographic information, how should we focus on them? So for the first time, we've got sequences of welcome aboard kind of communications going out to certain segments of donors. We have a staff that understands why we're focused on the segments we're focused on. And we're not spending time and energy competing with one another for the establishment of priorities. We understand what the data says, we're trusting the data, and now we're trusting the process.
That's great. Okay, I got one more formal question, and then I'm just going to let you expound on anything you'd like to add. But if one of your peer leaders asked you why Spot On, what would you respond?
If one of my colleagues in another United Way said, Joe, why should we do this? I like to kid around with folks a little bit. I don't know more than 1 or 2 United Way CEOs of major United Ways in the country who are data analytic experts. I actually know a couple who are. But the vast majority of us are fairly clueless when it comes to that. And so you need expertise to guide you. Um, um, you need help in deciding where you're going to focus your scarce resources, because again, I don't think any of us have the capacity to do everything we want to do. I don't think any business does, actually. And so from a business standpoint, business decision-making standpoint, the spot-on experience not only gives you that data analytic and guidance, it does something else that I think is often ignored, and that is that it helps to create a really strong culture in the organization. Because you don't just have a couple of the, quote, leaders, the titled leaders, sitting down and doing, Solomon-esque kind of choices and whatnot. We're not equipped to do that anyway. What you've got is everyone from admin, staff, all the way up through the CEO having a shared learning experience, and having their voices heard as we make choices about what to do. That's what builds ownership. And if you got ownership, it's much more likely you're going to see things through to some productive end. And so that's been a benefit of Spot On.
Awesome. Let me ask you one off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Just if you were to describe, Joe, what the atmosphere was like during the better part of a week-long workshop, what did it feel like in that room for you and your team?
When I think back on the time we were together, I would say that the first couple days, it was oh God, what are we doing? When are we going to get to something concrete? And then there was, I think, kind of a, happened at different times for different people in the group, but there was kind of like this sequential aha among the group. And there were a bunch of us. There was the realization that we had to have some of the early on conversations in the process in order to understand the choices that laid in front of us. Absent that, you run the risk of it being, well, the CEO said we should do that, or the director of development said we should do that, or whatnot. That's not what you want. What you want is, you want a collective, yeah, that's where we need to be focused, because look at what it's telling us. Look at the lifelong value of this donation. So if we can retain this person into year 3, the data tells us we'll probably have them for the next 15 years. Wow. You don't know that if you don't do the analytic. You don't know the kinds of nuances that exist in the data if you don't really dive in. And the consultants at Spot On, they know how to do that. They help train folks how to do that. And so you have collective shared experience, and that's powerful stuff.
For someone that hadn't gone through one of these before, could you answer the question, was any fun had at all?
We had a lot of fun. We had a lot of celebration. We had, if you know the song, It's All About the Bass. You ain't lived till you've seen our development director of workplace campaign dancing and singing It's All About the Bass, because we were talking about what's our base. Not in the same way as the song, but hey, so we had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun.
That's great. Joe, anything you want to add that you'd like folks to know about it moving forward?
I think the thing to keep in mind is that it's so important sometimes to have fresh eyes looking at your data. You may think you know what you've got, but we all carry baggage about how we relate to the data. And so when you have fresh eyes come in and look at it, it can challenge some assumptions that you've got, and I think we had a couple of our assumptions challenged. And that's a good thing. That's a really good thing. And so if you bring an open mind to it, if you trust the process, if you commit the time it takes to do it and not try to shortcut it, because you can't compress this into 3 or 4 hours and think you're going to get the benefit of the whole exercise. So it's a learning experience, a discovery experience. It's a satisfying experience because you come to conclusions fairly quickly. And then you got to figure out the execution, but that's the job anyway. So it's a good thing. I mean, I I'd without hesitation recommend folks seriously consider it.